Hello, everyone. Welcome to the finale of season one of Lane Split with Malika. Last week, we spoke to Ganesh Shinde, also known as Miles on Canvas, who travels and paints with all his heart and soul, spreading lots of joy everywhere he goes. If you missed the interview, please do watch it. The link is in the description below. Today's guest is not your usual paint and brush artist, but one that uses metal and saws. He makes beautiful sculptures with scrap metal and also builds custom cafe racer style bikes. A very fitting guest for this weekend as the whole world celebrates the cafe racer style as part of the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride. Please welcome Saaduddin, also known as Ionic. Hi, Saad. Welcome to the show, Saad. It's a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you.
I'd like to start off asking you how you got into working with metal.
I got into it over like a period of time. It just didn't happen like all of a sudden. Uh, I was brought up around vintage cars. My dad is a vintage car restorer, so I was brought up around machines and old tools and old mechanical stuff. But I had gone for my masters to the United States, and after I had finished it, I had come back here to Hyderabad, and I wasn't finding a job here. So it was quite difficult for me to get a job as a mechanical engineer here. So instead of wasting my time, I just got myself a welding machine and I started welding things. And not just welding things, I wanted to learn how to weld, but somehow I don't, if you tell me to sit and practice welding every day, I get bored of it. So I wasn't like following a strict regimen on practicing my welds and all. So what I started doing was I started taking up small projects that I can do. So I can learn how to weld on those projects, and at the end of it, I'll have a complete table or a complete chair or a stool or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And slowly, those projects started becoming more artistic and started becoming more sculptural. And I started using a lot more creativity because, again, I had to use what I had around me. I couldn't go out and buy like nice shiny new steel to make a really nice table out of. So that also forced me to be creative, and I started enjoying that process more. And that's how I'm here. And then I did get a job finally. So this became part time, and I was doing this after office hours and during the weekend and weeknights, and now I'm doing it full time. So I quit my job and I'm full time into this. Yeah.
Oh, that's a new development. I didn't realize you had quit your job.
I quit in January, so it's still I'm sort of learning how to handle the business part of this now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Nice, really nice. So how many years has it been then since you started?
I think it's been about 7 years, if probably 7 years and 2 months maybe. I think I started in September of 2013, probably.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah,
Long
August, September. Yeah, actually now it feels like a really long time. So
I know you mentioned that your dad was in the restoration business, and this is something
right.
I spoke to your brother Hamza about also. And he told us that your maternal grandmother used to do rally races, right? And your mother
Right, yes.
was a navigator. That is just such an interesting story. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
we've had like especially my grandmom's side was quite heavy into cars, and it turned out that my grandmom from my mother's side, turned out my dad is also into vehicles, and so we've been brought around that environment where, uh, like, if the car's broken down, you fix it yourself. If something's damaged, so we're pretty hands-on compared to I think the other people who call a plumber every time the tap is leaking.
it's a self-sufficient family when it comes to vehicles, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
What sculpture are you working on these days? Can you show us something?
Uh, these days, I'm working on a rhino. This is just sort of me trying to. I usually build a lot of birds, so this is me trying to sort of branch away and try different animals also. So I'm working on a rhino. You can take a look.
Oh, that's amazing. Wow. And this is all scrap metal, right?
Yeah. So this is all. Yeah. This one's scrap metal. So I don't specifically use scrap metal. I use whatever I get, whatever I can.
Mhm.
So sometimes I fabricate like this cross sculpture that I made is fabricated from steel, and the chains are all recycled scrap.
Oh wow,
So,
beautiful
so
contour.
it's thank you. So this is actually like has been designed by another blacksmith in London called Joshua Delisle.
Okay.
So based off of his design, I've made a few changes to it and uh, just added my own character to it.
Okay, very, very nice. So, how long does it typically take for you to make such a sculpture of that size?
There were a lot of people ask me that. So there's really nothing specific. It depends on what you see. The final product is basically different iterations of the same thing. So sometimes I'm almost ready to complete a sculpture, but then I don't like something in it. So I break it down completely and start over again.
Okay.
So so I don't really, it takes however long it takes to complete it and make it look nice is what I would say. uh, that being said, there are a couple of steps. One is the sort of the composition that you sort of plan it out in your head. So for a sculpture like the rhino, the composition is something that I've been thinking for a month, but I haven't actually gone down and started making it yet. And that process starts much earlier on, and it's something that keeps going on in the background of my head. It's not, I don't know, I somehow find it difficult to be creative when I have to be creative. I find it easier to be creative when I'm not, I don't have to be creative, and I have to, like, I have doing something else, and in the background I'm thinking, okay, let's think of a new sculpture and all. So yeah, so that process starts much early on, and the actual physical building is again a second part of the process. that that also takes up a little bit of time. So
Do you do some kind of
yeah.
mock-up before you actually start working with metal? So, like with cardboard or any kind of contouring or anything
Mm,
like that?
no. So another reason I find it difficult to take commissions from people is that I really don't do any sketching or drawing.
Mhm.
I have a very bad imagination, so I can't. Creativity is one part, imagination is the other. The imagination, I can't really, even I don't know what I'm going to make until it's in front of me. It's something tangible that I can put on top of each other, weld it together, and see. So most of the sculptures, unless it's like a table or something that has to follow a certain structure, or if I'm building a machine or if I'm building a bike which has to follow certain engineering that's involved in it. Rest of the sculptures is mostly freehand. I have an idea in my head and I look at a lot of pictures on Google images for references and sort of soak everything in. But when I'm actually going and building it, everything is what happens in the moment is what's happening. What is how I start developing a sculpture or piece.
Right, right, right. No, I totally get that because I think you said it like in the using the right words that creativity is one thing and imagination is the other. Like I'm unable to visualize the finished product myself in like just in my head. So
That's
unless I
right.
put
Yes.
the paint on canvas, I normally don't know where the painting is going until it is.
Right. Yeah.
It's like that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and also I think that's another part of the process that I enjoy, because when I set out to build a sculpture, uh, it's all chaos. Like it's all grinding dust and sparks, and you're getting burned, and it's heat, and you're hammering and doing it. And after all that chaos, once that final piece comes in, you can sort of take a breathe in and realize, oh, nice, I've made something out of that complete chaos. And that process is also what I enjoy a lot. I like the whole part about with metal sculpture is that it's quite physical. So it's not just your mind. You've got to put your body also and sort of work and sort of push and manipulate metal to take the shapes that you want. So
Mhm.
that's also something that I like.
Very nice. It's a process of discovery, right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Really cool. Could you give us a tour of your workshop?
Sure. Yeah. It's a small place. Now that the bike isn't here, there's a little bit of space to move around.
Okay.
So another thing that I found difficult being a sculptor in India or here is that most of the tools that people find in other places,
Mm-hmm.
in like say Europe or America and all, I've had to build them myself over here, which sort of sets you back in terms of realizing your thing. You've got to have a decently equipped workshop to actually go out and start building stuff.
Right, right.
That's my welding machine. This
Yeah.
is probably the most expensive thing, most new and most expensive thing that I've bought for the workshop.
Okay.
And for many years, this yellow welding machine over here was my go-to machine. Was the machine where I built, I think, 90% of my sculptures on. It's a
Oh, wow.
cheap Chinese 30,000 rupees, I think,
Like
machine.
monster though.
But yeah, it's quite big because it can do quite a few things. It can do aluminum TIG welding, it can do arc welding, and stainless steel TIG welding also.
Okay.
So for quite a while, that was the most expensive machine I had for many years. But now I've upgraded to Fronius, which is an Austrian company. And I think because of this machine, now I'm sort of able to start building bigger sculptures and more complicated stuff. So if you saw the peacock, a couple of peacocks that I built recently,
Yes. Yeah.
they were built using this machine. So
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
What other tools do you
this
normally use?
yeah. So this is a drill press that was donated by my boss from work. Uh,
I need
he
a
he
boss
was
like that.
he was kind enough to give it off to me, and this is a belt grinder that I've built for working on knives. So I'm starting to getting into making forging knives
Okay.
and stuff. So this is a belt grinder that I built for that,
Mhm.
and this this is an English wheel that I built years ago for shaping metal. So this comes in useful when I'm working on bikes for
Okay.
the body work and building the tanks and for shaping sheet metal.
Okay.
So the pulsar that I built recently, all the body work was done on this
Oh, very nice.
using the English wheel. You've got different wheels also over here, so
Mm-hmm.
for different shapes. So this is my pile of junk,
Mm-hmm.
which one of the piles of junk that I've got here. And I go around scrapyards around Hyderabad and also mechanic workshops, and people give give some of the old stuff that they've got also.
Oh, wow.
Uh, and also like go to the chore bazaars and all Sunday markets and pick up anything that I find interesting. So
Mhm.
this is one of the piles.
You truly are making something so beautiful out of, like turning chaos into art. It's such a
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing I quite like about using like scrap material is that each of the parts that I use already have so much character in them.
right.
Uh, so what is junk for other people? I actually like parts that have character that come from cars and motorbikes and washing machines and stuff like that. And actually, when you build a sculpture out of it, it automatically adds so much detail and depth to any piece.
Yeah, yeah. True.
Yeah. And this is my forging area outside. That's the pride of my workshop. It's a 50 kilo anvil, which is again quite difficult to find in Hyderabad.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, and that's a gas forge that I built uh, a year back.
So what is
So it
forging?
runs.
Can you tell us a little bit about forging?
Forging is blacksmithing. So you're heating up metal and then you're hammering it into shape.
Okay.
And like in ancient times when people didn't have welding and all, the only way they could manipulate metal or steel or build swords or agricultural equipment was by heating it up and hammering it, and yeah, stuff like that.
Oh,
So
I see, I see. Okay.
though that's like some of the hammers that I've got,
Yeah,
my
that's
hammer
quite
rack,
interesting.
and those are all the different tongs that I've got.
Oh my
So
God.
no, usually it's a lot messier than this, but I've cleaned it up for the interview.
Thank you.
So yeah,
Amazing. Wow. Yeah, I the sculptures that you did for the Bangalore Moto Art Show, they were
right.
amazing. Like, and I think a lot of them I had requested that if you could use motorcycle parts, right, for the eagle
Right.
and the hand sculpture that you had, and like you just said, right, like using parts just automatically builds a lot of character and detail to those sculptures, and they were
That's right.
everybody loved your work at the show. I also wanted to talk about the helmet that you did for Helmets for India. That was
Right.
another showstopper. Everyone was blown away by your concept and the beautiful helmet that you did. Can you tell us a little bit more about the story behind that helmet design?
Yeah, I think it was from me being a metal sculptor. It was quite. I had to sort of come on sort of figure out a technique that I can weld onto the helmet without actually damaging the helmet and keeping the general shape of it and all. This is what another part that I like about metal sculpture and all is also you've got to think about how you're going to engineer a piece also. So that's where my background, sorry. Yeah. So probably that's where my background as a mechanical engineer also comes in, where when you're composing a piece, you figure out not just how it's going to look, but how you're going to get there and how it's all going to fit in together and stuff like that. So yeah, with the helmets for India, uh, with all of my pieces, I don't want it to be looking like a static piece. At least that's what I try to achieve. I want it to look like it's a snapshot that you've got of something that's of something that was moving or something that's dynamic. So if you look at my birds and all, they're not just sitting; they're already all like the kingfisher diving into the water. So it's I try to get that. So with the helmets for India helmet, I wanted to the whole reason for the charity was to promote helmet safety and to promote road safety and to make people start wearing helmets. So I wanted to show something. Wanted to sort of humanize the helmet, show that it's beaten up, it's rusted, it's burnt, but it still looks strong enough to protect what's inside you. That was the idea behind it. So the humanizing aspects was, again, I put in the band-aid, I put in the stitches with copper, so that does a little bit of contrast to it. And then I had the helmet itself tearing away from, like, the part that protects your head is safe, but the rest of it is all torn, and it's sort of the speed is trying to push it away, but it's still grabbing onto your head or whatever. So that's what I wanted to try.
Kind of like disintegrating, like Hamza also keeps
It's
saying.
kind of right. It's kind of like disintegrating, but it still looks like it's strong enough to still solid enough to protect you, and it's still stubborn enough to hold on to whatever it is. So yeah, there's a lot of philosophy that people don't really get when you look at a piece, but I think you need to put that in so that at least a little bit of it trickles down visually to the person who's viewing the sculpture. Yeah.
No, everyone was super curious about that helmet, your helmet. And I think a lot of them came and asked you about it also, right?
That's right. Yeah. So I made up the story while I was telling it to them.
Okay. That
I didn't think of all of this while I was working on it. Yeah.
Tell us the story behind your moniker, Ionic. Where does that come from?
Oh, there's not much of a story though, because I was making
make it up
furniture and all. Sorry,
you
I'm
do-
going to make it up now. Yeah, wait. I know. Yeah. So I was making a lot of furniture, and as usual, when you put it up on Facebook and all the other social media, everyone says, "Wow, you should start your own company, or you should start selling this stuff and all." So I needed to start a Facebook page, and I needed a name. So the iron is what I use most in my work. Iron, steel, but the basic element in steel or anything is iron. So I was just thinking anything that stems from iron is ionic. Or it's not ironic, it's ionic. And like cathodic, anodic that you have, right, which attract different things. So anything that stems from iron or that I'm making from iron is ionic. So that kind of a thing. And then when I don't use iron and I use other things like stainless steel or aluminum, that's when it becomes ironic. So I think it just works both ways. So yeah.
Super cool. Does Hamza play any part in your sculptures?
Oh, in the bikes, yes, definitely. Because again, I don't have an imagination when you're coming to when I'm making something, and with bikes, you can't really afford to do it. So he sort of sets. When we are building bikes, we build probably one bike a year. We don't take commissions, unfortunately. That so many people keep asking us, but so he sort of sets the guidelines for the bikes, and he's got a very good eye for proportions and stance and everything, which I have got a very bad eye for. So he gives me the guidelines, and again he makes like a very basic render for the thing, like the pulsar that we built.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you don't have the pulsar on site, right, to show us?
Oh no, it's at a friend's place actually. So yeah, so this is the sort of a rough rendering that he makes, and this is like a guideline for me to when I actually start metal shaping it, to try and take inspiration from this and then work on my metal working that that goes onto the bike later on, the body work and all.
Okay.
Yeah. So this the Pulsar is the most complicated and most I think ambitious bike that we've built or I've built, because it's all got aluminum bodywork, and welding aluminum is supposed to be the most difficult thing uh,
Why is that?
among different parts of welding. Firstly, you need a completely different machine setup to do it, and also aluminum conducts heat very quickly. So as you're welding it, it starts to melt all of a sudden.
Oh, wow.
And compared to steel when it gets hot, it glows red. It starts changing color, right?
Right.
Aluminum doesn't do that. It stays silver throughout. So many times it's one part that I've just welded is lying on the table, and I put my hand on it and I get burnt because you can't see how hot it is. So yeah, so aluminum is quite difficult to weld, and especially sheet metal aluminum. And this the bikes that we build, they all sort of wait for us to push our skills further, to improve our skills. So we always try to take it a step further with each bike. We're not going to build like an amazing bike straight away. Like we started with the small RX hundreds because that's what we had the budget for back in the day. I'm talking like an old uncle, but that's what we had budgets for. And from there now we with the Pulsar, we really wanted to go ambitious and say, chalo, this is the one to do it and let's do it. So Pulsar is what took us about 2.5 years to complete the bike. I think almost 3 years now. So yeah, there was a lot of failures, lot of struggles with that bike, but glad we're done with it, and I'm looking forward to doing a better job on the next bike.
What were the most challenging parts on this Pulsar project? The tank or
I
the
the
light
Yup.
pairing that you did?
When we were sitting down to discuss the project, we had probably the only thing that we had decided was all the aluminum is not going to be painted. It's all going to be raw metal. So any hammer dent, any scratch that you put in there is you got to start over. You got to cut out that piece and start over again. So basically, all the aluminum bodywork uh, took a lot of time, and I had to keep redoing the parts again and again because they're not happy with it or they had some sort of an issue or the other, which yeah, which I think all the aluminum bodywork is good, but overall I think completely the whole bike is a good sort of example of all the skills that I've accumulated throughout the years now, working on metal. So I've got forged foot pegs, and I've got scrap stuff that I've used to make some things, and quite a few things. So the bike's got a lot of detail in it.
So that means that you have to ride it really carefully now, and you can't get any dents or scratches on it, right?
No, I think once the photo shoot is done, we were ripping the bike, so we are fine with it now. एक बार photos ले लिया and everything is done, then we can ride it. And actually, surprisingly, the bike itself runs really well. It's really nimble. Uh, I think it's because we've ripped out all the nonsense from it, and whatever we did put on it was lightweight aluminum and stuff. So it's quite fun to ride the bike. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Really nice.
So one thing that I wanted to point out is that Hamza and I, we always wanted to get into custom bike building. Yep. When we grew up watching shows like American Chopper or Monster Garage and stuff, but there's always that drama that used to happen on screen, and we were always looking for that small snippet of Ricky working on a tank or welding something together, and that was the only way of us learning how to do all of this stuff.
Right. Oh, wow.
And it's quite difficult to learn the skills, learn metalworking and everything yourself, especially when there are very few people who actually teach all this, how to go about it, this and all. So very early on, we had decided that we had built a bike, and we decided that after we built a bike and we got it built by a mechanic, and we got everything fabricated by somebody else. And after the bike was done, we got featured in a bike magazine and stuff like that, and our faces were there and our names were there, and it just didn't feel good because we didn't really do the work. We were just giving the money and showing कि भाई ये photo लेके भाई tank ही ऐसा बनाना, भाई wheel ऐसा रहना and all that. And that is when we
This is the blue RX 100 with the tan seat.
No, this is a bike that we don't talk about. It's a Royal Enfield. So it's a Royal Enfield chopper, and at that time there's a full chopper. Even now also everyone goes mad about choppers and all of that. So Yeah, so we were also into in that category where we were chopper banayenge बोल के and all of that. So after that, we took a step back and we realized that this is not what we want to be. We want to, uh, at least I want to sort of build everything myself. Even if it's crap, I want to build it myself. I want to learn the skills and not just be somebody who's getting things done and then say putting my name on it and saying ki that is done. So that's when we realized that we will not take commissions. We will save up money. We'll build a bike ourselves. We'll sell it, and then we'll fund the next bike project with that. So yeah, so that's just, I think, when people see us building motorcycles, they think कि हाँ, this guy will build custom bikes or bike modifier है, but that is not what it's about.
So I'm sure you know this weekend is the DGR, the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride, and
Okay.
something you subscribe to, you and Hamza. Like, how do you feel about the whole movement? Because I mean, the cafe racer style is quite prominent, right? Like dressing up and uh,
Yeah,
the community and going out for the
I
ride,
think
and spreading awareness about men's health.
yeah, probably DGR. We really stay away from all of this, even though I'm sure that uh, they do spread a lot of awareness and all. But motorcycle culture, Hamza can speak for himself, I guess. But me, I stay away from motorcycle culture a lot. I kind of feel it's just another gimmick, like the motorcycle companies trying to sell their product to people. uh, the whole of have motorcycle clubs and stuff like that. Because if you look in India, dude, like in in Europe and the States and all, having a motorcycle is like a class thing, and it signifies freedom and being able to go where you want. Yeah, India mein, there's a family of 8 for whom that motorcycle is the only way of going from one place to another, and they don't make such a big deal out of it. So it's something that's quite a big juxtaposition. So I don't really subscribe to that motorcycle culture. I'm sure motorcycles might give a lot of freedom and all, but I also feel that it's something that's propagated by companies to sort of sell their products, like how cigarettes were supposed to be cool back when they were advertising stuff. So yeah,
Or like Valentine's
but
Day by Hallmark.
yeah, exactly. It's all like pura capitalism ka khel hai. But
Yeah. और अभी तो social dilemma भी है, not just capitalism.
हाँ,
Is there anything you would like to tell other artists or other metalsmiths, who are coming up and learning and trying to teach themselves?
I I hope my work is good enough to sort of inspire them, or at least like the way I work, rather than me telling things. But it's quite difficult. A lot of college students and all, they send me messages saying ki, not a lot of you, they send me messages saying ki they want to learn how to go about learn how to weld, learn how to do it, and they don't really find, they do take engineering in college, but they don't really find it interesting, but they're interested in working with the hands and stuff like that. uh, the it is quite difficult because you need to, firstly, in India, you need to have the space to be able to do this. Then you need to have the tools. But I probably say is that the best way to learn is to do. So save up money, and to make anything, regardless of what material it is, whether it's paper, cardboard, or steel, you basically just need two tools. You need something to cut the material with, you need something to join the material with. That's it. And then you can make stuff. So get yourself a welding machine, get yourself a pair of grinders or just one grinder, and just start, and you'll get there. The whole main important thing is to just start, and that's the difficult thing, and then you can start making things and do it. I really didn't have the space when I started out of for most of my time. Okay, I had like half of this room because over here, floor to ceiling was stacked with my dad's old car parts and all.
Oh,
And actually, when I actually did start out, I had a small wooden table. I had this bench vise,
uh-huh.
and I had a welding machine, and I had a grinder. I was in one small corner of the veranda is where I started working on most of my sculptures, and it's only now that I've been able to expand into all of this. I did start taking classes to teach people all of this,
Mhm.
but because of the COVID thing, we've stopped doing that, and probably we'll get back to it also. I feel quite jealous of painters and digital artists like my brother and painters like you people and all. Is that you guys can make one painting and take a photo or a scan and stuff like that, and then sell prints for a much cheaper rate, right? For me, every sculpture is a struggle, and every sculpture is the end. So the like, even if I want to, I can't replicate it again.
Mhm.
And the moment I sell it, that's it. It's gone. And when I was struggling as a sculptor, I had sold some really good pieces for really cheap because I needed the money at that time. And I just think maybe it's just easier if I can ditch the welding machine and just pick up a paintbrush and just start painting. It'll be so much easier. But yeah, so that's also a good comparison of the, even though we all artists and all, but some things are a little bit more difficult. But
Definitely.
yeah,
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, yeah, we can quickly scan and reproduce prints and stuff. Uh,
yeah,
but yeah, I mean, all the effort you put into that one single piece, that's why you can demand a lot more money than probably we can.
I wish that was true, but
I think, yeah, it's much harder to sell as the price tag goes up.
yeah. So that's the thing कि यहाँ इंडिया में, like, at least the way I've seen it is that appreciation is a lot, which is good, which sort of motivates us. But to actually purchase the stuff, the people who appreciate it can't afford it. They're mostly youngsters and it's still getting there. So I hope probably the next generation of metal sculptures will probably have a better market in India.
Mhm.
And yeah, I'll probably be able to create a market for them, hopefully,
I
and
mean,
yeah,
that is one of,
they'll be able to sell their work.
yeah, that is one of my goals, right now in this lifetime, hopefully to, make things better for all of us artists in India,
Yeah,
and, be able to reach all those kinds of people who have, who know the value of unique original art, and,
that's right.
not
I'm I'm quite lucky now to have a few patrons who actually are eager to buy my work and uh, take it up. So that is really really nice to know. Ki, there are people out there who are ready to purchase the work and all. But then ये भी है कि अगर वो लोग नहीं, if they don't buy it or if it doesn't go into their collection, then it's difficult for me to say. Another question I had is why do uh, like these proper highbrow art galleries sort of, it seems like they shun people, artists like us, or at least artists like me, from carrying the work. So I don't know why that is so.
I don't know. I think
Either my work is not good enough, or maybe this is not the kind of work
no, I
that they
don't
want to carry.
know. I don't think it's a question of whether your work is good enough or not. I think mostly what happens is if you're known enough or not. Like,
Right. Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So it's a क्या कहते हैं, like this the social your social network thing. If you are
Okay. Right.
hanging out with that kind of crowd, like like they say, the page three socialite
Yeah.
crowd, then I'm sure like one connection will lead to another, and you will be in a gallery very soon, in a highbrow art gallery.
Yeah.
But
That sucks then. Yeah.
that really sucks. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
especially in India, right? Like that was the one distinction, big, major, encouraging thing in California, that, emerging artists, whether you're known or not, that you had
Mhm.
plenty of spaces to show your art in. Like there were plenty of art galleries and even like non gallery spaces like restaurants, cafes, and all that were only focused on showing artists around their neighborhoods, like the local artists who the lesser known artists.
Yeah.
Because obviously, like here in India, it's all a matter of who you know.
Yeah, and
How,
that kind of defeats the purpose, because if you know the right people, then I can put some coffee stain on a napkin and sell that as art also.
yes, totally.
But
We should
there
try.
has,
When we are famous
but
and
then I don't know. I don't know those kind of people. But in a way, it's good. But now it's sort of demoralizing for me. Earlier, when I was starting out and people were saying, "Ki, your work is good," I used to take my work to galleries and show it to them, and they would say, "Ha, it's good, but it's not good enough for us to sell, and there's no market here." So that sort of motivated me to try and work harder and try to make better sculptures instead of saying, "Yeah, it's not going to sell, whatever." So people, galleries and all ignoring me at that time was quite good. But now I think I confident enough to say I've reached a level where, okay, I'm decent. I'm not the like great, but I'm decent. But even now that they don't even reply when I send them my portfolio and stuff, they don't even reply back. And so I think what you said is right. It's all about hanging around in the circle and doing it,
Yeah.
which kind of sucks then.
Thank you so much, Sad, for being on the
Yeah.
show with me. It's a pleasure to
Okay.
have
Thank
you.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, and it's quite good to see people promoting artists in India, especially. यहाँ पे, because we do get a lot of exposure in terms of our work being viewed, especially with social media and Instagram and Facebook. But then to actually keep having exhibitions where people can actually go and look at the physical thing. What happens on social media is that it's like fast food art ke waisa. You are scrolling, you see the artwork, you press the like button, you're off to the next one. But I think exhibitions where people can actually go and spend some time, look at work, interact with the artists, and buy their work, and it also inspires people to take up art also.
Yes.
So I think that's something that happens to have happen more in India, especially, and it's good that you're taking up the initiative for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I was really hoping to do a show this year, and in fact, Hyderabad was on the list for this year.
Okay.
But I guess it'll have to be next year.
Yeah.
All your sculptures in the show, not just one or two, but all of them. If it's in Hyderabad,
that'd be good, because if it's motorcycle centric, then I really don't know what to make. But yeah, so
then we can see your pulsar in action also, and all the little dents and scratches.
no. Okay. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
So, cool. All right. Thank you for having me. Khuda Hafiz.
Thank you everyone so much for watching this interview. I hope that you got a good insight into what goes on behind the scenes in an artist's life. It's a combination of many, many failures, trials, and errors. Nothing comes easy. This concludes the season 1 of Lane Split with Mallika, and we'll be back next season with many more interesting and inspiring artist stories. Until then, follow us on Instagram and here on YouTube, and check out our print shop. This is your host, Mallika, signing off.